If you found yourself utterly alone, deep in the forest with the sun sinking behind the trees, what's the first thing you'd do to survive? Would you set out in a random direction, hunt for water, or try desperately to build a fire by rubbing two sticks together just like you've seen countless times in movies? Most people have an idea of what they would do in such a dire moment, clinging to comforting fragments of wisdom passed down through families, spewed by adventure shows, or dramatized on the big screen. Yet, what if much of what you thought you knew, what you'd rely on in a life-or-death scenario, could actually get you killed? Popular survival advice circulates like folklore shared between friends, echoed on social media, depicted in page-turning thrillers, and reinforced by heroic figures braving the wilderness on television. These rules become so rooted in our collective imagination that we hardly think to challenge them. After all, if everyone's heard them and they look convincing on screen, shouldn't they be true? This sprawling web of survival myths grows ever denser, woven from fragments of outdated folk wisdom, dramatized entertainment, and the timeless human urge to simplify a terrifyingly unpredictable world. Here's the unsettling truth. When the wild truly closes in, clinging to myth could be the biggest danger of all. Survival isn't about bravado or blind faith in life hacks. It's about knowledge, preparation, and an unflinching willingness to question even the most deeply rooted advice. Let's embark on a journey peeling back the layers of so-called survival wisdom. We'll trace the origins of iconic tips, dismantle their dangerous illusions, and shine a light on what science, history, and the experiences of real survivors can actually teach us about staying alive. Because when nature calls for your wits, not your wishful thinking, the difference between myth and fact could mean everything. To understand how survival myths worm their way into our beliefs, we need to untangle the forces shaping their persistence. At the root lies the irresistible power of stories. Humans are storytellers by nature, fiercely drawn to tales of triumph, an ordinary person pitted against the wild, surviving through grit and a handful of clever tricks. We pass these stories around campfires, echo them in tales for children, and later, when the glow of the television screen replaced flickering firelight, we watched improbable feats play out in perfectly choreographed scenes. Hollywood has carved deep grooves into the collective imagination, shaping how we picture the fight for survival. We see heroes conjure fire from stones in minutes, drink straight from sparkling streams, or set off with unwavering certainty that moss means north. The result is a cinematic shorthand, survival reduced to a list of dramatic set pieces and the viewer, all too willing to take notes. A prime example, water. Adventure tales often portray flowing streams or rivers as pristine gifts from nature, ripe for immediate slaking of thirst. The myth that running water is safe to drink is so embedded that many would reach down without hesitation, cup their hands, and gulp deeply. But this shortcut, rooted in the hopeful logic that moving water is naturally filtered, could lead to a dire fate. In the real wild, invisible bacteria and parasites lurk even in rushing brooks, their presence indifferent to our assumptions. Giardia, Cryptosporidium, and an array of other microscopic threats can leave the unprepared survivor weakened, feverish, and dangerously dehydrated exactly when resilience is needed most. Another enduring misconception, the notion that desperation justifies desperate measures. Trapped in desert or wilderness, some remember pop culture survivalists gulping down their own urine to stave off death by thirst. The reality is far less heroic and decidedly bleaker. Urine is a waste product for a reason. High concentrations of salts and toxins force the body's already taxed systems into overdrive, hastening dehydration and inviting kidney damage, not salvation. Even the response to animal threats is steeped in confusion. Take the oft-repeated advice, if a bear attacks, play dead. While this can work in certain, very specific encounters with grizzly bears protecting their young, it's disastrous advice with black bears, which far more often require assertive resistance, not passive submission. Such nuanced distinctions rarely survive the journey from wilderness manual to movie plot, with dangerous consequences for those who assume a single rule applies in every harrowing moment. Why are these myths so tenacious? Part of the answer lies in our psychological wiring. We crave certainty, shortcuts, and simple solutions in the face of the unknown. Urban life rarely puts these beliefs to the test. The wisdom goes unchallenged, growing ever more entrenched, while the actual skills required to survive remain unpracticed until the day we need them most. Misconceptions don't thrive on storytelling alone. They're helped along by human psychology and the social machinery of rumor. It feels good to be confident, to have a pocket full of tips for when things go wrong. But confidence built on falsehoods is treacherous. Psychologists have long recognized our affinity for cognitive ease, the urge to accept familiar information as true, especially when it's wrapped in an emotionally charged narrative or comes from someone we consider credible. Survival myths thrive precisely because they are easy to remember, evocative, and offer a comforting illusion of control. News stories, unvetted articles, and well-meaning friends transmit advice with viral efficiency, rarely pausing to scrutinize origins or accuracy. Before long, these tidbits become so widespread that questioning them seems almost heretical. The phenomenon, called the illusory truth effect, means a myth repeated often enough starts to feel intuitively true, even when it's provably false. And when fear is in play, when the mind races through scenarios of hunger, thirst, and the unknown, fast answers tend to overshadow thorough reflection. The consequences are sometimes tragic. Consider the persistent myth. If you're lost, follow moss, it always grows on the north side of trees. The origins of this advice date back centuries, fueled by the real observation that moss favors damp, shaded surfaces. But in reality, moss grows wherever moisture lingers the longest, whether that happens to be north, south, east, or west. More than one lost hiker clinging to this half-truth has only wandered deeper into confusion. Or think of the advice given after a venomous snakebite: make an X over the bite and suck out the poison. Repeated in countless movies and shared among generations, this intervention does far more harm than good. Attempting to excise venom risks worsening the wound, and oral suction is not only futile but can introduce infection. True treatment for snakebite centers on keeping the victim calm, immobilized, and getting rapid access to medical help, not on cinematic heroics. Even the motivation to do something, anything, can backfire. Scrambling in panic, racing downhill in hopes of reaching civilization faster, or ignoring the slow build of hypothermia leads many toward tragedy rather than safety. In survival, the wrong kind of action is sometimes worse than no action at all. By the time an accident occurs and myth is put to the ultimate test, the real world can be unforgiving. Reports from search and rescue teams are filled with cases where misplaced confidence, not lack of courage, proved fatal. The U.S. National Park Service and wilderness medicine journals repeatedly warn against over-reliance on hearsay or television stunts, citing examples of hikers attempting to drink untreated water, wandering off-trail believing in faulty navigation tricks, or delaying proper help while applying folk remedy salve with sometimes heartbreaking ends. The truth is stark, but liberating. Wisdom in the wild isn't about knowing the most popular tips. It's about discerning which ones are right, which are deadly, and being humble enough to learn the difference before it's too late. So what should we believe and practice when it comes to survival? Stripping away the myths, we find that true preparedness relies on principles, both time-tested and grounded in science. First and foremost, respect for the unknown. The wild is not a playground for bravado, it's a system governed by natural laws, impartial to our confidence or desperation. The primary enemies aren't the dramatic dangers of Hollywood: the hungry wolf, the lurking snakebite exposure, dehydration, disorientation, and panic. When it comes to water, the golden rule is this: always purify before you drink, no matter how clear, cool, or fresh the source appears. Portable filters, boiling, or chemical treatments can reliably neutralize invisible threats that no amount of wishful thinking can defeat. For shelter, improvisation skills, and calm assessment of materials on hand trump any particular method for building a perfect refuge seen on screen. Staying dry and insulated from the elements, especially wind and rain, can be the difference between life and hypothermia. Navigation myths like the Moss Rule are best replaced with solid skills, using a compass, recognizing landmarks, and above all, staying put if you are truly lost. The vast majority of lost individuals are located much faster if they remain stationary, make their presence obvious, and conserve energy. If movement becomes necessary, slow, deliberate progress with attention to surroundings is safer than blindly pushing forward. First aid, too, demands a departure from folklore. Modern wilderness medicine teaches that with injuries or bites, the priority is always to minimize harm until professionals can take over immobilize, keep calm, and seek help promptly. Every year, seasoned survivalists and rescue professionals gather knowledge from their harrowing experiences. They share it not through flashy entertainment, but through detailed training, courses, and carefully documented best practices. Listening to those with real-time field experience trained search and rescue volunteers, indigenous experts, and wilderness guides can save more lives than any viral tip ever could. Real survival isn't a collection of clever tricks. It's a mindset. Scenarios change, needs shift, and the best tool at your disposal is always adaptability paired with knowledge. Readiness is not about carrying a pocket full of hacks, but about cultivating attentiveness, humility, and the ability to pause, evaluate, and apply tested methods step by step. Skills such as fire building, water treatment, wound care, and map reading do not spring from wishful thinking, but from practice, repetition, and study. Take, for example, the seasoned instructor who quietly demonstrates how to filter dirty water with available tools, or the quiet confidence of hikers who check their bearings with a compass every hour. Their security doesn't come from a single clever saying, but from a web of small practical habits acquired over time and tested under pressure. In essence, the more we interrogate the myths, the more we appreciate the subtle, disciplined art of true survival. Those who thrive are not the boldest or the bravest, but those who respect reality enough to meet it on its own terms. As we sift through the tangled roots of survival lore, the central lesson emerges with clarity. Your fate in a true emergency will hinge less on dramatic gestures or popular sayings and more on practical skills and skeptical thinking. The wild is no respecter of myths. It challenges every assumption, exposing each shortcut for what it is, either an asset or a liability. In that crucible, humility and disciplined learning prove to be the most reliable companions. Far from being a mere intellectual exercise, the scrutiny of survival myths can be a literal lifesaver. Next time you come across a snappy tip or confident pronouncement about surviving the elements, pause and ask, where did this information truly come from? Has it stood the test of real experience and observation, or has it simply echoed unchecked through time? Are you training for emergencies by practicing genuine skills, or simply rehearsing wishful thinking? The real challenge isn't memorizing 100 tricks, it's being able to separate substantiated guidance from seductive fiction, to spot when the wisdom you carry might actually expose you to harm. The most valuable tool is always an open but critical mind. As you close this story, consider, what other fragments of common sense shape your choices, both in the wild and in daily life? Might some of them, under pressure, prove just as precarious? Let this curiosity spark further exploration. Seek out reliable expertise. Question what seems obvious. Embrace the slow, steady work of learning what really works and why. For in the final tally, survival is not about defeating nature, but about respecting its lessons and learning to live within its rules. When that wisdom sinks in, you carry not just the tools to survive, but the insight to thrive, both out in the wilderness and back in the constructed world.